Okay, in this video I'm going to show you how to change 7 calls into 31 calls booked without spending an extra penny on your ads. And this is something that is tried, tested. We do it in our own business, we do it with many of the businesses that we work with, and the most interesting thing here is that it doesn't matter if it's 7 calls into 31, it can easily be 70 calls into 310 if you're a larger scale business and you're already spending a little bit more on your ads and working at higher volume. So this is just all about leverage. It's about asking yourself better questions to get better answers on the other side. So, you know, the easiest and dumbest down question that you can ask yourself is, if we've already got an ad strategy that's already working, how do we get more from it? And the easy thing to say there is spend more money on the ads. Now, do not get me wrong, it's one of the most important parts of the entire process, fueling the front end to get more out the back end. However, one thing that we find with most coaches that come to us, and this is even coaches who are doing multi-6, 7 or multi-7 figures, and they come to us to work in close capacity to add an additional acquisition channel or to optimize their ads in the first place. Very often we find that they've got an ROI, they've got a 3x return on their ads or a 5x return or a 7x return on their ads, and they want to know how to scale it efficiently. But what they mean by that is, how do I get from £100 a day of ad spend to £1,000 a day of ad spend and maintain a really strong ROI? But the first thing you should be looking at is, which levers can we pull in the overall system to increase the outcomes without any additional ad spend? Now, that does not mean that is the final step, because once you have that dialed in, then you can actually increase the front end ad spend to dramatically increase the growth and acceleration of the growth of your business. Okay, so I'm just going to show you here on screen exactly what I mean about how 7 calls into 31 calls booked would look. Now, I literally just fast-tracked a little bit of maths here, so I'll see if I even remember it. I'll probably get it wrong, but it'll be pretty close. So I looked at it as 300 leads from your ads into conversation. Okay, so we'll map this out as in steps. So this is step 1, 300 leads from your ads into conversation, and just so it's easy to read here. So okay, so this could be using Instagram ads, it could be using direct messenger ads, indirect messenger ads even. It could be using a lead magnet that goes into WhatsApp Business. It can be using many different methods of starting conversations through different means. It can even be engagement campaigns connected to ManyChat that start conversations on the other side. There's so many ways to do this, but it's very common, especially if you're working with general pop, that we're able to achieve 300 leads in total for about £300 of ad spend. Now, if this is, and by the way, sometimes we'll get 600 leads for £300 of ad spend, but simultaneously, if you're in higher skepticism markets, if you're in business coaching or something, it's going to be a little bit more, but you may have more expensive products, so it all kind of evens out. But anyway, 300 leads for £300, okay? Let's say that when you're speaking to them, you send the first message, and let's say 20% convo continue, okay? This equals 60 convos continued. Now let's say that a third of them, I can't even remember my maths if I did 33% here, but let's see, or offered a call, okay? So once the conversations have continued and you've got your 60 here, how many people, and I know it's not the next message, there'll be a couple of bits of back and forth, but how many people are actually offered the call? Well, let's say that this is therefore 20, and let's say with this that we have let's say 35%, I would say. We could do 33% again. Call offered, actually book, okay? And so that's going to be roughly 7, okay? So 7, something along those lines. So if we have 300 leads, 20% of the people who come in as leads, conversation continue. It should be much higher than this, but 20% is sort of baseline of what you can be happy with in a conversation strategy. 33% going to book call would be about 20, offered a call, sorry, would be about 20, and then 33% would mean about 7 people book a call from this. Now from $300 of ad spend, this is a good cost per book call, and we tend to find that conversation into book call has high show rates and high close rates, so this is a good method even if you're using any of the 4 that we talked about on the front end. Okay, oh, we're gonna run out of battery here, and we're back. So we'll look now how to get from 7 calls to 31 calls now that we have a system that can have 300 leads come in for $300, and we have a system that can turn those leads into book calls at a great cost per book call. Now we'll look at how do we actually pull the lever of not doubling the ad spend to 600, but instead how do we actually spend no more money but get way more people coming through. Now, when we look at these numbers here, this may include follow-ups, okay? So at a point in which somebody here ghosts or somebody here ghosts, we may actually have follow-ups in here to achieve the 33% in total that actually come through and book, okay? So taking that into account, just for easiness of numbers here, let's say that this includes all follow-ups to get to this number. Well, let's say that you've done a couple of follow-ups here and there, and you're not gonna be that guy that does like 8 different follow-ups to somebody that's shown even just the most minimal amount of interest in something. Well, here's a simple follow-up that you can do after, let's say 14 days have passed, something along those lines, but you can have it as a system where 14 days pass and then you go back to the people from 21 days, and so that's 7-day period, and then at the end of that week you offer everybody who is unconverted that never booked a call, you go in with a really, really good message to offer them the opportunity to jump onto a call with you. Now, this can come in many different formats, how you can present that call, how it's like special or different, or it could just be the fact that, hey, you've opened up your diary for some additional spaces, and in that moment where you actually have opened up your diary for some additional spaces, these are the people to go to with it. So here's what you end up with in this situation. You have 300 leads, you have 60 who have responded, you have 7 calls, and you have, well, technically you've got a lot more than this, but you've got 200 that are completely unconverted. You could say that you've also got another 53 here who are partially unconverted, okay? But even if you just look at this right here and you say, okay, so there's 240 people who either reached out to me through a messenger ad, commented because they wanted a lead magnet, opted into a specific lead magnet, or followed me specifically. So like 4 different examples. There's actually many other ways that you can do this as well, but those are 4 pretty good examples of how you could run ads if you want to have more volume of good conversations. So let's just even focus on the 240 here, okay? So if we're focusing right here on the 240 that are completely unconverted, well, if you give them 14 days, right, on the other side, you don't do any additional follow-ups, but then you hit them with something that gives them the opportunity to book a call with you, so calls offered, so how many people are offered a call? 20. Well, this comes into something that's a really important question that you should be asking yourself, which is, it's not just how do I get more conversations started, but how can I actually offer more calls? Okay, because remember at the start of the video I was saying about how important it is that we focus on asking ourselves really high quality questions to get to great results on the other side. Well, it's not just the volume of the front end that fuels the outcome, it's actually how many calls are offered. Because for instance, if we had 300 leads and we had, 60% conversation continue rate, if you told me 0 calls were offered, well, then we would know what the issue was. No calls have been offered. If the call is not offered, the call cannot be booked. So then if the higher quality question becomes, how can we offer drastically more calls? Well, what we can do is we can go to the 240 who are completely unconverted with a really good reason to jump on a call in the next 72 hours, and we can send it to all 240. Bear in mind, at this stage, there are still people who have taken zero further action since they opted into your lead magnet, followed you, or any of the other systems that we talked about there to start a conversation. They've not taken any further action. So what is the issue with going back to them with something that meets them with love, that has a real reason, that's outcome driven for themselves, to jump onto a call with you or your team, and reaching out to them with borderline a copy and paste message, but with a little bit of personalization in there? This is something that could take yourself or a VA somewhere in the region of an hour and a half. They might split it out just for making sure there's no issues with accounts and things, but in total about an hour to an hour and a half of work here, and 240 calls can be offered. Well, let's just say that was 10%. 10% conversion from 240 offered. Remembering that there's also 53 warmer people we can go to also. So we can actually take this further than 7 and 31 if we're going to use the maths here of taking into account the 53, but even just looking at the completely unconverted, where people often say, that person didn't reply to me, low quality lead, they've got no interest. Well, maybe they actually just weren't ready to engage in a conversation with you, right? Maybe they're really interested in, like, let's say you're in body transformation. They're really interested in changing their body. But in that moment, they liked your lead magnet, but they don't know who you are. But guess what? If they've opted into your lead magnet, if 14 days down the line they've now absorbed it, they've received 10 emails from you, of which they opened 5 of them and read them to completion. They follow you on socials now and they see some of your stories and daily updates of wins with your clients. Well, guess what? When you reach back out to them, this can be highly fruitful. Okay, this is something really important to remember. Short-sighted coaches are looking at this 240 as inverted commas, bad quality leads. Not engaging with them further is the thing that makes them a low quality lead, or it's more in your hands low quality sales generation, okay, or lead generation I should say. So these 240, there can be so much gold in here. So when I say 10%, and this is literally 240 calls being offered, this is not 240 conversations being reopened, 240 calls being offered. So there's nothing to say that you can't get a 10% conversion rate here into calls. If that was to happen, we would have 24 additional calls with no additional ad spend. Okay, so now we have a total of 31 booked calls rather than 7, by simply asking ourselves the high quality questions and getting to the best possible outcome. So looking for those levers that you can pull to get drastically better results, okay? And once you've taken the time to assess everything after the click, after the lead, the emails, the touch points, the follow-ups, even bringing this strategy right here into your business, that's the point in which you can say, okay, I don't want to spend 300 a month on ads with this amazing outcome. So 300 spent, 31 book calls, that would be like £9 per book call. Instead, I want to get to a point where I'm spending 3k a month on ads, but instead of having 31 book calls, I have 310 book calls, okay? And then you have, of course, team and everything that support you in the conversion rates there as well. Now, the battery's about to run out for the second time, so I'm going to wrap this up. Hopefully this has been valuable to you. If it has, like, subscribe, all of that jazz. Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you on the next video.